Hey everybody, welcome to another live. So excited to have everybody here, and as always, as you come on, we love the warm and fuzzies. Over the last few weeks, what we've seen is we've seen a lot of people coming in with questions before the stream, which is awesome because it allows us to dive in and get started really quickly. So let's go into our normal routine. And for anybody who's new here, our normal routine is just want to highlight a couple of quick items and then we will dive into questions. So my name's Jeff. I'm the founder and coach at practiceinterviews.com. We are going to be throwing a ton of banners up during this live to kind of prompt you to show where you can go to get coaching and especially to get some of those great free resources that we have. Let's go into our recap. So yesterday, we wanted to do a video that covered a question that comes up in these lives pretty much every week, which is, how do I reapply for the role? And we wanted to really set the tone and stage. But if you have gone through this application process and specifically gone from application to the interview process, it's really critical that you know how to leverage and utilize your POC. And your POC, obviously for the big companies like the Googles and Amazons and Facebooks of the world, it's going to be a recruiter. But as we move into some of these smaller companies, it might be the hiring manager, and figuring out the messaging and the cadence. It's just going to be critical for success to keep you in the process. As always, I just like to highlight really quickly, we love the positivity. We love the warm and fuzzies. So the intent is to keep this super positive and get your questions answered today. So happy to have everybody here. One last item I want to highlight. I was going through last week's video, and I think we had about 10 people come on and say that they had landed the role last week. So that was a totally awesome experience, and we were just so psyched for everybody to show up and talk about their positive experiences. So why mention that? This platform is not just about questions. It's about providing trending data, information, any sharing is caring. So let's dive in. Okay, Ira, coming in early. All right, awesome. Okay, let's go right here. So, hi, Jeff. I had my first round RK interview for a corporate FSR, that's field sales representative for Google Cloud role last week on Tuesday. Checked in with HR today, and she asked to wait a couple weeks for an update. Okay. What should I understand by this? HR had initially said that every round will be an elimination round. Okay, so I think let's focus in on the positive here. The positive is that they probably like you, and they probably have a pretty big list or group of candidates that are going through the process. So what they're trying to do right now is they're stack ranking. Do I love that approach? No, I don't love that approach, but they probably have 2 or 3 others in process, and they just want to see how everybody does. Now, if there were any indications in the feedback that you were not great or you were not strong, then what probably would have happened is they probably would have immediately rejected you. So it means that there's enough positive data and information and feedback in there to say that you're a viable candidate. So let's treat this as positive. Now, the hardest part, especially with the Google process, it just becomes the waiting game. You're just going to have to wait and see. So continue to check in with us and let us know what's going on. But I think it's positive for right now. How should one answer this question? Suppose you have X accounts and the last quarter of the year, by making a forecast, you realize that you will not hit your target. Okay. For a Google account strategist forecast, you can see that you'll only be reaching 85% of your target. How would you reach this target? After being rejected for a role at Google, how long should one wait to reapply again? Okay, so let's go back to this question because something like this is becoming very, very common. We're seeing a lot of questions of how would you change something and get something up by 10%? This question is very common, like you're at X percentage of goal and you're going to fall short of goal. How would you achieve that goal? What you want to understand in your clarification part is the historical data. Well, what has worked well over the last 3 quarters? I would also want to understand the trends. If we're coming into the 4th quarter of the year, What's the industry or type of client? Is it common for this fourth quarter to go down? How can we pool and utilize resources, or would we have that opportunity to make sure we were coming up with a strategy and plan? But really, when we get into the framework, I want to really focus in on what's been working well and double down on those strategies for the end of the year. I want to definitely work with internal stakeholders to see what are some of the strategies that they've developed. And then lastly, we're going to really work with our client to understand their needs, how we can really focus our attention to get them to achieve this result. So this is going to be about internal partnerships and external partnerships, even though it's really an external facing question. It's a super fun question. There's lots of ways you can go, but really focus on data analysis, trending information to help you get to that right solution. You received a Microsoft sales offer last week. Haven't signed, still trying to negotiate. Good. When I was discussing relocation via assistance with the recruiter, he was very shocked that I need a visa and said that they might not be able to extend the offer anymore. However, he's going to check with the visa team. What is your advice? I'm shocked that he didn't pick this up for my application form, and honestly, I didn't know what to do next. Should I get in touch with the hiring manager about this? No, I don't want you to get in touch with the hiring manager, but there should have been some awareness or some communication of this item throughout the process. Here's the good news. They already like you. So I really want you to focus in on the positive. They already like you. So it means that they're going to push harder to make sure that this process goes through. Yeah, this is tricky. Like, one of the first questions that any good recruiter should ask is, now or in the future, would you require sponsorship to be eligible to work in the US, to be eligible for this role, et cetera? It's really one of the first questions that recruiters should always be asking. So if it's not part of how they ask questions, that's just a little bit of a failure on their part. You're just going to have to sit back and wait and see. Hopefully they will be able to make it work, but come back, check in with us, let us know what's going on. And I'm sorry, this is definitely a little bit of a tricky situation for you. So if you have any additional questions, come back and let us know. And I'm going to do a little pivot here. I'm playing around with my mic setup. Okay. So quick question. What are some of the elements to focus on when answering questions around collaboration? For example, imagine you're on a team of experts. How would you contribute? So this is also becoming a very common Google question, like contribution when you're not the expert. The way I've also seen this question come up is, I want you to imagine you're invited to attend a meeting and you have no knowledge or information on the subject. How do you contribute and even lead? And so one of the ways that you lead is you start by listening. So it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but we need to data gather and have some information before we do anything. So we start with that real listening approach. And then what we would likely do in these meetings is we would ask some form of a probing question or questions, so that we are just really trying to look at it from a different lens. We're probably collaborating in that meeting because we offer something that's going to be different. So what types of questions do we like to ask? How do we like to probe? This becomes a little bit of an inclusion question. So how are we poking and prodding in the right areas? But it all starts with that foundational listening item, and then questioning. And then you could even build in some of the psychological safety to come in and really ask and collaborate in a very challenging way, but getting your approval to do it. And then when we get into the solution for questions like this, we are going to want to be heavily role focused. So how do we think about our own skill set? What do we bring to the table in this role and how we can contribute? Mercy, I hope that helps. Okay, Charity. Hi, Jeff. Thanks for everything. Just wanted to know what one can expect for an interview with a cross-functional interviewer. Okay, great. I think I'm actually going to try and do a quick short on the cross-functional interviewer, because there's there's so many questions coming through on the cross-functional. The cross-functional is, to a lot of extents, exactly what it sounds like. They're looking for somebody who can be a great team player across multiple teams. So how is this going to show up? Tell me about a time you had a conflict with another team. Tell me about a time you needed to get resources from another team. Tell me about a time you built a partnership with a strong team. And then we could just change any of those questions to how you would do it. I want you to imagine you're in this scenario, etc. So cross-functional is really about collaboration and showing that you're a great team player. And that's going to be consistent basically across any role. Thank you for the amazing work. Absolutely. We love everybody showing up, and obviously we can see the numbers on these lives going up every week. So we're really enjoying seeing all the engagement and all the people coming onto the platform. How would you answer this question in a googliness and leadership interview? You have to make a decision with your teammates, not your manager. Google, you have to make a decision. Oh, you have to make a decision with your teammates and not your manager. How will you approach this? Listening, questioning, and a data-driven approach. Because ultimately, if you have to make a decision, we're going to want to bring data to the table. We're going to want to make sure we have that collaborative space. Again, I know I already mentioned it, but it's a huge one. Psychological safety. How do we make it a safe environment for people to share their stance, share their ideas, and feel safe that they're not going to be ridiculed or anything bad's going to happen? Obviously, that's not the default expectation, but how do we come in and build this space? And then the other question is, how do you step up into a leadership role in this? And that's why it comes up in the googliness and leadership interview. How do you take the lead? How do you organize it? What does that organization look like? What does that meeting look like during COVID? How do you get everybody together? How do you build the space for everybody to share their opinions? And then again, ask everybody to bring data and ultimately come to a solution. So super, super fun question. Lots of different paths you can take, but absolutely taking some ownership and leadership, and then listening, questioning, and psychological safety are going to be huge steps, bringing that data component and ultimately an action plan. How much time do you need to prepare for the cross-functional interview? Preparation for any interview, it's really dependent on you. Just overall, how are you feeling when you see cross-functional questions? Do you feel really comfortable with them? Not feel comfortable with them? I mean, I'm a big fan of massive amounts of prep and practice, but at a certain point, we can't procrastinate and we just need to dive in. So I know that's not a very clear answer, but it really is a personal feeling on how much time you need. Hey, John, welcome back. Okay. What advice do you have for those applying to next level up jobs within their own company and trying to negotiate salary? Feel like it's hard to get a good offer versus coming from the outside. 100%. Yeah, it's going to be harder to get a good offer internally because they know exactly what you make. They know exactly where to push the buttons. I had this recently with an Uber client, and up-leveling at Uber, and we just couldn't get internally what the market would have paid externally. And I think that there was a pretty big differential. So for those applying to next level jobs, it's just tough. So there's got to be another driver. There's got to be a driver that's just different or outside of compensation for you. Like you love the organization, you really want to be there. The next level up jobs are all jobs that you're really interested in. All those jobs have people in leadership who you already know and really like. That piece is probably the most important piece. If you have a great lead or great manager, you're going to be way happier in your job, and the compensation should be secondary. But yeah, you're just kind of stating what is the truth, which is when we make moves internally, especially if those moves are pushed by us, it's harder to negotiate comp. Has anyone applied to a FAANG while their visa is currently under process? Is it safe to start applying during the extension process, or is it better to apply once we have an EAD in hand? Yeah, I think that this goes back to the earlier question that we were covering, which is this, we would expect recruiters to ask this question, but this is where you may want to share that data in the process. At a lot of these big FAANG companies, we know the process can take a long time. So approvals might go through as you're going through the process. I don't really want it to be a stopping point, but if you see any challenges in the sponsorship process, it's just something you would want to be highlighting. You obviously want to build those good relationships and build trust with whoever your point of contact is at the FAANG companies. And obviously, that's almost always a recruiter. Any tips on interviewing regarding the policy solutions specialist? This is considered a part of GTech, but mainly troubleshooting. Not sure if you'd be asked anything related to coding. Okay, so troubleshooting roles do sometimes have coding interviews. It would be usually one coding interview that's going to be focused a little bit more on Eng fundamentals. So think like going back to school, like more CS course type stuff. It's not going to be heavy duty into the weeds, but sometimes these roles will require one coding round. I can tell you on the policy roles, and I can throw this up there, on the policy roles and on like more like technical solutions engineer roles that we have a ton of questions in the question bank. So you can go and use this link up above to help you. But remember, of course, the number one place you can go for these items is you can go back and ask your recruiter. We need to ask our recruiter if that's going to be a part of the process or not. I hope that helps. All right, Earl. Hey, do you have any advice on how to approach the first days of a new job, specifically with remote onboarding? How to know the manager and coworkers, how to ask for help, how to ramp up faster? Yeah, all questions that I would say to throw right back into the process, right? So actually talk to your manager, talk to your coworkers. What have they seen from recently hired people? And how did they build their brand? How did they really make sure that they were effectively contributing to a team, maybe an established team? So just ask those questions, because we can wonder, but if we're just really putting it out there, it's going to be really, really helpful. It is harder to build your brand, especially when we're doing this virtual onboarding. So I know it's really tricky, but just have a really open approach. And then as people are starting to get to know you, I like that less is more model early on. So the less is more model is we do a lot more listening and questioning early on. And then as we learn the ropes, then we'll start implementing more of our opinion. Of course, I don't want you to back off of that too much, but people usually respond well to those that listen and really kind of take a step back. Remember, people love talking about themselves, love talking in general for the most part. So those are a couple of approaches I would recommend, but you're definitely thinking about it in the right way. Okay, can someone help me answer this? Tell me about a time when you had to change your attitude or approach when working with different people on different teams. When did you realize that you had to adapt your style? How did you identify the changes to make? What are the different styles did you change, and what were the outcomes? Wow, okay, that is a pretty intense question. So you are going to want to cover this piece by piece, right? So what we would do is we would set the stage with a very clear situation about what was the actual instance where we were working with different people in different teams, clearly and simply outlining the teams and why it was critical to build relationships with them. Then we want to talk about really kind of the initial part of the story is when did you realize it? That is very, very quick. It's like we realized it right away. And so in order to identify the changes, here are the steps in research that I did, here are the conversations I had, and then for different styles, you could say a few different styles that I needed to adapt to were A, B, and C. And ultimately, by taking all these items, we came up with a strong execution plan. We tested it, we launched it, we presented it, we documented it, and the great results were. So we're really thinking through every part of this question. Like those first couple of questions, we get through them very, very quickly. And then it's really about digging into the changes and how we made those changes based on different personality types and whatever example would make the most sense. we've all had to adapt and adjust in our career. And so we might not have had something major, but something minor would definitely work in this case. Okay. Start an amazing journey interviewing with Google 2 months today. I just signed my offer to start with Google Cloud in early September. Amazing. Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for being here. It's an amazing journey with you. Obviously you're a great person, and that's a part of it, right? So we got to do all the prep and practice, but then we just have to be likable in these interviews. And so much of the likability is really making a connection with the person we're talking to. And Mark, for you, I know that was an easy step for you. So congrats. So excited that you made it to this point. Hi, Caroline. Okay, I passed the Google PM interviews and I'm being considered for L4. The comp range provided by the recruiter is quite lower than my expectation. The recruiter said that there is a cap for L4 total comp. Is there anything I can do with this cap? If I leave my current company, I will give quite a lot of RSU, a difficult choice. I'd like to see if anyone has a different perspective. So, yeah, so it's pretty rare that the total comp range is being shared. So I think that there's a little bit of we need to share the knowledge here. In states like California, where I live, if somebody says, hey, what's the salary range? They actually have to provide that salary range, but they don't have to provide all the compensation details. So sometimes we hear some ranges from recruiters and we get really scared, but it doesn't include the stock component. Now, of course, if you're walking away from some significant RSUs, you just want to note that to your recruiter. And if they say, we don't consider current comp, your response is, but I do. And I will absolutely not walk away from a pile of RSUs if you're not going to compensate me appropriately. I'll just decline the offer. It's not going to be that quite of an aggressive tone, but you would say, I understand that in some states you can't consider current comp, but that does not mean that I will not consider it. So regardless of whether your compensation team considers it, I need a 50K sign-on for the RSUs that I'm walking away from, and I need the total comp to be 320K a year, average over 4 years. Those are my drop dead numbers. Otherwise, I can't make them move because you're just asking me to take way too big of a pay hit. So we're hearing and getting a lot of details and feedback on the fact that in some states now they're not even considering current comp, but it doesn't mean we can't push back on that data point. Now, if they're saying the compensation team won't take it into account, doesn't matter. We're taking it into account and we need to push back on that item. All right, grab a coffee. I signed an offer last week with Apple, but this week Google extended a higher one. Can I go negotiate with the Apple recruiter to match? Can I just decline after signing the offer and go with Google? How bad does it look? Yeah, so I would not take a higher offer from Google and try and renegotiate at Apple. That's not in good form. So I would not recommend taking that step. Now, could you decline Apple and accept Google? Yeah, you could. You just want to, if you're going to take that step, decline Apple right now, like immediately, right now, because you have to give them time to find the appropriate candidate. And they might have some people who were early stage or somebody who interviewed who wasn't quite as good as you, but let them know ASAP. It's just going to be the right thing to do, because the longer you hold off and wait to make this decision, the more you're going to put Apple in a tough place and kind of burn some bridges. You're going to burn a bridge anyway, but it's not going to be horrible. You haven't started yet, but I would absolutely not go back to Apple and say, hey, guess what? I got a better offer from Google. They're not going to be happy about that. They might end up just saying, hey, like, we're rescinding the offer or something like that, because it's not in good form. I hope that helps, and good luck. It sounds like you're not in a bad situation. How can you improve on your leadership vocabulary? Google. Yeah, so I would just kind of look for key themes, key terms, key words that are going to be attributed to leadership. And then what you want to do is you want to do the exercise of, oh, I do that, or I do this. And that way you'll figure out what are the leadership terms that you really connect with. The reality is on the leadership side, it's so wide open that I couldn't even begin to narrow it down for you. But leadership, it's the gamut. So it really goes well beyond those basic leadership skills to a lot of the soft skills as well. I hope that helps. Sorry, everybody, caffeinating and hydrating. Okay. Why do Google recruiters ask you to list the people you know at Google? Do they contact each person on your list? If you were interviewed before, is it okay to give the same list each time? Yeah, they ask for the list for internal referrals. And internal referrals, they help. Let's say you get to hiring committee and hiring committee is on the fence, but you have 3 really strong referrals. That might be enough for them to push you over the top. So internal referrals are great. The number one item with internal referrals is you better be 100% sure that those people are going to say good things about you. I had people submit names of people who totally bashed the person who shared the name, and then I had to end the process for them. And of course, you're not going to get that information. The information would be, unfortunately, we've decided to move forward with other candidates, and the specific reason is a bad referral. So when you submit those names, be very, very careful. Be 100% sure that they're going to say great things about you. This is something that I personally got burned on in my career, of somebody who told me they'd provide a good referral for me and basically kept me out of multiple jobs. This was earlier in my career, and I found it out in the weirdest of ways, and I won't get into that story too much, but it's really, really important that you know if these people are going to say great things about you. And yes, you can use the same list again if you like to. Okay. Hey Jeff, I lost an opportunity in review committee after clearing all the rounds. Not sure what went wrong because all the interviewers were very good. Okay, so I want you to take a little bit of time to self-reflect and ask yourself, were there any questions where I felt like I could have done a little bit better with that question? Were there any questions where you felt like maybe you didn't build as much connectivity as you could have with your interviewer? Because the feedback was probably good, but the very good category probably would have helped you get through hiring committee. So unfortunately, the feedback wasn't strong enough. And that's when I just want you to go back, do a little bit of self-reflection. And I know that that's not the like warm and fuzzy feedback that maybe you want, but the reality is that if it was really strong, you would have passed. And when you don't pass, they rarely give you any data. Sorry to hear that, but keep trying. If you made it that far, they're going to come back to you. You're going to have another chance. This is where we start to have to play the patience game a little bit, but there was enough good data in there where absolutely they will come back to you in the future. In all the salary negotiation videos, I kept hearing about having and sharing the competing offers with the recruiter, but how is this done? Forwarding the email screenshot or just the words of the applicant? What's the most common format? How does the recruiter know which is the real ones versus the fake ones? Well, you can just share the numbers, and if they say, hey, I need a screenshot or I need the data, then send it to them. Yeah, normally we can just share the numbers, and if they're like, hey, I need real documentation, then share that documentation with them. Now, sometimes you will hear from companies, you cannot share this offer with anybody, like it's illegal to share the offer. No, they've given you that data. That is your information to do whatever you want with. So you can share it. I've heard this a couple times. I just think I don't agree with that statement. And the chances that you'd ever be held liable for sharing that information with anybody else is pretty much slim to none. Okay, Caroline. Okay, I'm interviewing for an HR role, people consultant. Would you say it's behavioral based? A lot of information is regarding PM or tech roles, and I haven't seen much input on HR roles. It's still going to feel a little bit similar for any kind of non-tech role. It's going to be a mix. So it's going to be a mix of behavioral and open-ended. I would anticipate both. You have to be ready for both. It's just rare that a people consultant role would not kind of test the theoretical. I want you to imagine in said scenario, what would you do? How would you do this? Be ready for both. It's usually about 50-50. HR may potentially lean a little bit behavioral, but we don't know. It really depends on your interviewer. So, for example, if you and I were going into a googliness and leadership interview, which probably leans a little bit behavioral for most, I would lean heavily open-ended. That was my strategy. That's my approach. Those are the questions I like. And I have a lot of flexibility to ask the questions I want to ask. So we can never 100% predict. Do you have a bar raiser round for Google? How is it done? No, there is no bar raiser. That's the bar raisers. Really, Amazon and Microsoft are the two companies that have a strong awareness, use a bar raiser. Google does not have that approach. Every interview is a bar raiser. So yeah, I mean, and of course, all the interviews at all those companies are really tough. Okay. You've been interviewing with Google and another large tech company. The other tech company gave me an offer last week, but you're waiting for Google, as Google is your first choice. Had a team match, and finally looks like Google is going to go forward with the hiring process. HC Comp Committee. Okay, and you just had a team match. Looks like, okay, so that's the same note. Okay, and then he has asked for a written offer as input for Comp Committee. How much will the competing offer matter to the Google Comp Committee? Yeah, it matters a lot, but I wouldn't share that offer yet. I would say no. I want to see what Google's offer is, and then based on Google's offer, I'll share my competing. They don't need your competing. They can come in, set the anchor high, and then if they come in lower, share it, because it's not going to benefit you. If you come in and the competing offer is low, that's not going to help you. So they need to come to the table first, and you can push back and say, no, I'm not going to share this offer until I see Google's offer. And if they say we can't move forward to Comp Committee without that offer, you're going to say, yes, you can, because you would do that for a normal candidate, and I really appreciate it, but I need to see what Google can come forward with first. And if they start pushing back and say, hey, you're wasting our time, say, well, the competing offer is confidential, and I only really want to utilize it if Google is not meeting that bar. And currently, as I've stated and already told you, my anchor is X amount per year. So yeah, I think you push back and then definitely use that competing offer if Google offers is lower. How would you answer? Imagine you're a part of the product review and other side doesn't want to compromise. You disagree with a certain design decision, but the other team won't budge. How would you resolve the conflict? What factors would you consider when crafting the strategy? So this is pretty common, right? We've all been in these scenarios where there hasn't been a compromise. And so when we're part of product review, a couple of the items that we really want to think about are features and timeline. So like they don't want to compromise, but maybe you can compromise because we're really pushing for a feature that isn't really necessary. Or maybe we can say, okay, if we don't get what we want, how do we look at the timeline to actually get what we want? We really need to figure out how significant making this compromise and pushback is. Is the impact at a critical level? Because if it's at a critical level, then we actually might want to take a different strategy or approach. But sometimes these questions they're asked to trip you up a little bit because maybe the impact isn't super large, and we can go more into that compromising, like we can sit back and compromise a little bit more. Again, listening, questioning, empathy, positive intent. We're thinking about all this from a positive perspective, like they're doing what's best for the team, best for the organization. And then we're going to give our counterpoints, and then figure out how we can maybe go with their path right now, but can we implement something in the next sprint? So maybe we're only 2 weeks off, or in the next quarter, maybe we're only, a few months off. Figuring out and finding that nice timeline to agree moving forward can also be helpful. So something I would really want you to push on. If you have 10 plus years of overall experience and 1 year account manager experience, are there any chances that you can call for your requirement for 1 year for 1+ year of AM role. You tried 4 times, but you got ignored. Okay. Yeah. So we all have kind of like pivots in our careers, right? I spent the majority of my first basically 10 years out of college not in a recruiter role. And so, obviously that will play into you getting hired for any of these roles. But if you're getting ignored, it's probably because you're applying and you are not networking. And so, one of those items, and I'll throw it into the YouTube description, but it's the video titled "How to Get Hired at a Tech Company," and we show you the approach to networking on LinkedIn. It's a give first model, but oftentimes if we're just applying, and not getting anywhere, we need to start networking. But remember, always give, don't ask to get a job. If you use the give model, it will work. It just takes a little bit of time. I've been scheduled to have a team matching interview for digital marketing apprenticeship. What advice would you give me? And what should I do if I don't have interest in the team? Okay, well, the number one thing to do when going into any team match, from my perspective, is to be a great listener and have a ton of great questions to ask. And a lot of those questions, even in the team match stage, still stay warm and fuzzy and not too challenging. What do you love about the company? What do you love about the role? What's the most fun and unique challenge you're working on? What is going to be the greatest opportunity for me to have success in this apprenticeship? Positive, positive, positive. So really nice positive tone. Make sure that you're using those great listening skills. Those are going to be the top two. Can't worry. What if you don't have interest in the team? Let's table that. Because if we even go in with that partial mindset, we're leaving an opportunity for a future state that we just can't predict. So worry about that after it's over, but don't worry about it now, because I don't even want that to enter your space. Also, sometimes just to get into the door, it may not seem like the ideal match, but getting in the door, especially at Google, it can be really, really helpful. And I think we're talking about Google here. Okay. I want to thank you and your team. You've been offered a position at Singular. I was shortlisted and taken up for the first round at Google, but it didn't make it. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. We love hearing about people's positive experience interacting and engaging with our platform. Again, I mention this kind of every week. I know we're just a very small piece of the process because all the work is being done behind the scenes. And that's the item that nobody talks about. When you land these roles, people just assume, well, you got lucky or you got the right interviewers. And landing a job at any company, usually we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes and people just don't see it and they don't know it. So I'm sure you put in that great effort. And so congrats. Thank you so much for giving the positive feedback. We obviously love that here. Okay, everybody, I really scrolled really far down here. Okay, there we are. Okay. Can someone with no product experience, 5 years or otherwise, stand any chance for an APMM role, okay, or a PM role? You tried 10 times, but no shot. Okay, so going back to what I stated before, networking approach. Yeah, if you're trying to apply to get into a role where your background isn't really strongly aligned, it's probably not going to happen. Now, an APMM role, maybe, but a PM role, again, I'm not here to tell anybody what is possible and what's not possible. I believe anything is possible, and we have to go in with that mindset in the job interview space, in life. And so I don't want to tell you what's not possible. I just can tell you that the PM roles are the hottest roles in the world outside of AI and ML Eng. Those are the two hottest roles in the world. So the competition is going to be fierce. So if you want to get in front of those types of positions, you're going to have to network your way in. You're not going to get in by applying, because you're going to be missing out against people who have much stronger just matches from a resume perspective. Okay. Thank you so much for that. We're trying to build trust, and we hope that you trust us. And remember, everything we say, it's not always gonna work out. One of the biggest items that I try to spend a lot of time talking with in this audience and just in general. And I think that it's a missed point across the other platforms is all this advice is absolutely terrible if we're not adapting and adjusting to our audience accordingly. And we are not always going to get the best interviewers. So how do we pivot? How do we really connect with them? Because building those connections appropriately with people, it's going to be a huge part of the interview process. Oftentimes that goes way past the words we use and how we put together our answers. So we're here to help. And that's why we'll keep showing up every Wednesday as long as people keep showing up here. Hi, Jeff. What is the chance for an external candidate if the hiring manager takes the internal candidate forward for a role? Can that change after one receives a rejection email? Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. But I think at this point, they've probably moved forward. I think that there's kind of this misconception, especially at Google, from what I saw, that Google will lean to that TVC who's been working there for 2 years over the external candidate. And while they strongly should consider the internal more, they have way more data on the internal person. I didn't find that that was the case. I found that everybody had a really fair shake. In some cases, I felt like the internals kind of like all the work that they had done had kind of been forgotten. But at this point, the chances of hearing again, yeah, maybe in the future for a different role, especially if it went well and you were like a number 2. Of course, definitely potential there, but chances that something's going to fall through now, I would say less likely, especially with an internal who probably has already been in the role, likes the role. It seems like the max offer for a product manager, L5 at Google, is around 400K, and L6 is around 500K. When giving salary expectations, is it okay to bump these up by 10%? Yes, these are very, very accurate numbers. In a premium plus market like the Bay or New York City, these are the numbers: 400K for an L5. 400K for an L5 and 500K for an L6. I had an L6 product manager client for the negotiation and 500K. So that was the offer. So these are very common numbers. 10%. Sure, 20%, maybe. Just make sure you push the envelope. But I think a 10% range that's a really, really nice range, because obviously these roles are already paying a premium. If you are in the product space and you are in the product space in a premium market, go out and interview. I mean, this is the time to get a product role. The salaries have had massive, massive jumps. Over the last couple of years. Product is so hot right now. So if you can get out there, you'll make a ton. And then there was a second part saying 440 or 550. Yep. This does not leave a bad impression at all. These are great numbers. Okay. Hey, Jeff, you made it to Apple and we're a big part of the victory. Do you have any advice on how to avoid delays in the background check with HireRight and the TN visa from Mexico? No. As long as everything was really clean and clear, you had all the dates down, everything was given right. It's fine. HireRight is like the third party that all these big tech companies use for the background check. So I think it should be fine. Apple's obviously an awesome company, and comp over time at Apple, pretty unbeatable. I mean, it's as good as any company. So that's amazing news. Congrats. So yeah, just sit tight. I'm sure everything will go fine. Nobody can tell you that number, Carol. Nobody can tell you how many questions will be asked in any interview at any company. They might have a plan, but how you answer the questions, everything could get totally derailed. So number of questions is totally irrelevant and not important. What I want you to focus in on is just creating those great answers. If I am going to give you a number and cast a wide net, somewhere in the 3 to 7 range is pretty likely. Okay. Imagine you're a part of a product review and the other side doesn't want to compromise. Okay, so we covered that question. Okay, let's try this one. Imagine you had worked at a company that had a problematic culture, teammates that didn't go along. What can you do as an individual in this work environment to make it more inclusive? I don't know, I feel like we covered this question in another live, but I I love this question. This is a question that I occasionally ask to my clients. And basically, if a team has a negative culture, or sorry, a company has a negative culture, then what we can do as an individual is we actually start with our team. Trying to change everything in a company wide perspective is not going to work. So we start within the smaller team, we kind of share data, share information, have those conversations, and we roll out some sort of test implementation, test plan. And then once that's successful, what we do is we socialize it, we document it, we roll it up to leadership and see if they'll do a test across 10% or 20% of the teams. It has to be a slow roll. We can't change culture overnight, especially if it's a negative culture. But I love that question. This is really about taking ownership, being inclusive, and taking the lead. So this is a very, very likely like Googliness and leadership question, at least on the Google side of things. Okay. Is it helpful for non-IT major professional, such as accounting and finance, to study Google Coursera online IT courses in order to find jobs in the IT field at Google? Um, if you're an accounting and finance professional, then you should go after an accounting and finance role at Google. They got a ton of them. Trying to take Coursera courses to become a technology expert, you're going to just be battling against those who have a lot of technical experience, education, work experience. So Google hires a lot of non-tech roles. So if that's your focus area, finance and accounting. Now, if you want to pivot in your career and get some training and education, yeah, nobody should ever tell you not to go out and do the learning, but a total pivot might take more work experience and more education than Coursera courses. But any way you can educate yourself is going to be great. An employee had a non-compete from his old company, but he knew previous employees that wanted to interview at the current company. How would you go and find the company and connecting with those employees? An employee had a non-compete from his old company, but knew previous employees and wanted to interview at the current company. I'm going to have you come back, and I know we're pretty delayed on these questions right now, but I don't understand the question. So if you can come back and restate it. Sorry for waiting so long and having me ask you to restate it. Okay, awesome. 2 FAANG companies for program manager roles. That is amazing. Thank you so much for the positive feedback. Again, we were a little part of your process, but we were happy to be a part of it. Okay, you'd love to land, say, a business analyst role at Google. What's your suggestion? So, um, business analysts, they're really good at 2 things. They're really good at diving into the weeds of data and that analysis component, and they are really good at speaking to people and finding out the challenge areas. So, listening, questioning, data, and analysis. If you are good at those skills, I would say go for it. The question would just be, does your background align with that kind of role? You'd like to move to another recruiter because it doesn't seem like we had much rapport in our first conversation. Do recruiters talk to other recruiters about candidates? I want to keep moving and building relationships, but I don't want to come off as too strong by trying to move to another recruiter. Yeah, Lance, that's not a recommendation. You got to build a relationship with the person who's in front of you. Do your best. That's all I can say. But asking them to switch recruiters, that's going to end in a stop for you because still early in the process. I believe you can come back and tell us more. Will GCA questions be in every round, or will the GCA questions only be in the GCA portion? Okay, good question. GCA questions will only be in the GCA portion. Remember, with GCA questions, there's only really 2 differentiators. One, randomness. So you have a higher likelihood of getting something pretty random, like open a pastry shop. And secondarily, these will be more probing questions, meaning after you finish your answer, they're going to have a list of questions, follow-up questions to ask you. Now they can implement some of those follow-up questions in the beginning, middle, or end, but GCA questions in general just tend to be more probing. So those are the 2 differences, one random item and some probing questions. How would you prioritize the positions you are sourcing for? How would you answer this? How would I know if it's a GCA or RRK? Doesn't matter. So the type of, it doesn't really matter. We don't want to get fixated on where this question is going to come, because this could come in a GCA or RRK interview. But how do you prioritize the positions you're sourcing for? That depends on where the support's coming from, what the role is. If you're a recruiter and you have roles that have sourcing support, well, you're going to prioritize the roles that don't have sourcing support. If you're a sourcer, you're going to prioritize based on what the recruiter, and ideally you're being included in those meetings, and what the hiring manager said. You're going to try and understand the criticality, and then you will basically rank those positions and time block accordingly. So whoever's pushing or yelling the most, usually that's a great path for us, but those are some starting data points. Again, that strategy would depend on the role. For a sourcing specialist, okay? I probably should have clicked on that button. So yeah, as a sourcing specialist, it's really about building a strong relationship with your recruiter and making sure that your recruiter, in as many instances as they can, is bringing you into the hiring manager conversations, if applicable, if it's for specific roles. You tanked your RRK interview because you got cut off by the interviewer during the first 30 seconds of me stating my career summary. I only managed to get through the summary of my most recent role. Okay. So the question would be, well, did you dive in and say, let me tell you a little bit more about my background? Did they ask you, tell me about yourself? Did they ask you to walk them through your background? What was the question that was asked? Let's come back. Let's get more into the weeds on that one. Okay. What is your favorite Google product? Is this GCA or RRK? Either. And with this question, it seems straightforward, but just remember, our interviewer, they might have a favorite product, and so we just want to ask a couple of simple clarifying questions. Would you like me to talk about my favorite hardware product or software product? Would you like me to really focus in on an overall Google product, or maybe a feature of a product? Just a couple of clarifying questions, then you can dive in, skip the framework, all that stuff. This is a very straightforward question, but you might ask a couple of clarifying questions, because they might say, ooh, I wasn't thinking about hardware. Yeah, let's go with hardware. And then you could say, okay, why Google Nest is my favorite thing? And then you can dive into the details, and maybe, again, just a simplistic question like that could help you have success. But that could come anywhere. Obviously, most common interview that's going to come up is a product manager interview. I don't see a ton of that in other interviews, but they still do ask it, and everybody needs to be ready for it. Okay, sorry, I'm going to go back to this. Okay, sorry. So you did give me more information. This got split up. So you tanked the RK interview before you could even get through the rest of your experience, which spans 15 years, and you were asked why you want to join the company and what you would do in the first 3 months. Do you think that was a good move for RRK? I mean, when interviewers cut us off, I literally, the challenge is the body language challenge, right? Like, do we have a negative reaction, physical reaction? We say, oh, great question. Like, anytime they pivot or interrupt or want to go down a different path, we instantly pivot and we go down that path with them. If they interrupt again and go down a different path, we go down that different path. Just make sure you're always adapting and adjusting to them. That's going to be the number one. Now, that might not be answering your specific question, but we're going to get interviewers that interrupt. We're going to get interviewers that are strong extroverts, high ease, and they just want to come in and they want to dominate. Let them dominate. Just make sure the times that you get to speak, that you're going down the path that they want to go, because we want to talk about what they care about. Clearly, their listening skills, their interview skills aren't strong, so we need to adapt and adjust and do it quickly. Even if I'm not opening up a better offer expectation in the first recruiter call, how do I handle it if the recruiter is clearing up about the range up front and it's a bit lower than my expectations? Yeah, I wouldn't even worry about it. Like, I don't want to worry about comp too early on. And again, remember, with salary ranges, especially if you're going after a big company, they're going to tell you, they can tell you base. salary range. They can tell you the bonus sometimes, but they're not going to tell you the stock. So we could be leaving out a major component of the compensation. So don't worry about it. Just crush the interviews, and then you can set the anchor high at the end. Worst case scenario, you decline the offer. They have some good interview feedback. You've upped your interview skills. You've actually gone after a job you wanted, and something could be revisited in the future. If somehow you find out that you received borderline feedback from the on-site round at Google, can you ask to be re-interviewed versus recruiter offering or asking to redo certain interviews? I'm wondering if this is something that's only offered to candidates by the recruiter, if the candidate can ask to be reevaluated. Yeah, you cannot control the process. So the process needs to be controlled by the recruiter. And remember, we don't know how they're going to react to that. So we just want to be really, really careful. Okay, Stephen, how's it going? Program management role related to interviews, leadership, and teaming. Okay, I think you're going to come back and tell us more. What strategy or strategies do you use for candidate follow-ups? Sourcing specialist role. Okay, have a system, and you need to clearly define how you have that system. And it's really a three-tiered approach for any good recruiter or sourcer. A three-tiered approach for candidate follow-up is critical. It is the ATS. So at Google, the ATS is GHire. How do you organize the data within GHire? Secondarily, an email philosophy. So do you block out Tuesday and Friday afternoons for 1 hour to follow up with any active candidates in the process? That's what I did. Third is really kind of that. So it's the calendar with email approach. So you block out the calendar, and then that calendar time is rigid. The number one item, I will tell you, the greatest success point that I had with candidates and candidate follow-up and candidate experience, the one thing I did better than a lot of other recruiters was I refused to end my Friday without following up with 100% of the candidates in process. No candidate ever went into a weekend ever without not knowing where they stood. Now, if I was going out to happy hour or dinner with my friends and I was cutting off of work at 3 p.m. on a Friday, there was no way between 1:30 and 3 that I wasn't doing those candidate follow-ups. Sometimes I was sitting in my condo at like 8 or 9 at night and I was doing those follow-ups, but I never stopped my day on any singular Friday ever without following up with everybody in process. And if you just mentioned that, say, no candidate goes into the weekend without hearing from me, that would be an amazing step, because that is the missed step that I built into the candidate experience part of the Google training for sourcers and recruiters. Friday follow-ups, no updates. Hey, Sue, we're going in the weekend. I still don't have all the interview feedback. I'll be in touch early next week. That is a 5-second email that makes that candidate feel good about you over the weekend. It's easy, and it's not being done. So I get very, very excited on that question, obviously. How soon can you apply once you get rejected? Funny that you ask. I did a video on that yesterday. My best recommendation is you get rejected in the interview process, work with your point of contact, build a good relationship with them. I will put that video in the YouTube description, but a better move would be just hop on my YouTube page. That's the exact video I did yesterday. Hey, Caroline, with HR positions, is it likely that data would need to be presented? Do you have an example of a question to prepare for? Yeah, data across the board. Driving results with data in any role at any company is going to be critical. So tell me about a time you utilized data to create a strong hiring strategy. How do you go about utilizing data to create a strong hiring strategy? Very simplistic questions. I think for the HR role, I don't know the exact people consultant role that you're going after, but let me throw this up here. You can go ahead and go into our question bank. And in our question bank, even if you went into like the technical recruiter role, you're going to get a good idea within those questions of specifically what data-driven questions look like. So definitely go to that link. I think that's going to be really helpful for you to kind of see what a data type of question might look like for your role. Interviewed final round. for role 2 months ago. Never heard back from the recruiter. In my mind, I wrote off the opportunity and figured I was ghosted. You applied to Google, cleared the interview, and now in the match stage, suddenly I receive out of the blue message 2 months later from the recruiter for the old position. Hey, how are you? The team is continuing to scale here, and I wanted to see if you were still available on the market. Oh, man. Okay. I'm sorry, I scrolled too far here, as always. How do I respond? I want another offer for negotiation. So I don't understand that last question, but you are going to respond positively, but you will ask the one follow-up question in a really nice manner. Okay, I wasn't clear if I was still eligible for that last process. But so I just want to clarify. So I didn't make it through last time, but you're still interested in my candidacy. You got to poke a little bit in a really friendly way, but they never followed up with you and now they're coming back. You really don't even need to say that. Just respond positively. It's been a couple months. Just get back into the process. If you did not give that feedback the last time you got that feedback survey, you should have, because, obviously being ghosted is pretty much the worst feeling in any aspect of our lives. So let me know if you have other questions. Hey, Jeff, you gave the recruiter feedback. Hey, Jeff, the recruiter gave you feedback that it didn't go so well with the hypothetical questions. I asked if I should wait to apply to other roles as I now have 2 rejections. She said no, I can reach out to her even if she's not the recruiter. She's happy to forward. Would you wait to follow up with other roles? How honest is the feedback? Thank you so much. I would not help you if the feedback was terrible. I would not have said that to you. Absolutely go to the video yesterday. I created templates. You can copy and paste that template into an email. Remember, when you do this with the point of contact, less is more, and share all the information. Again, yesterday's video will cover all the specific steps you need to take. But yeah, I would get back into it. Just think about, do you need more time to practice, prepare, or add or gain any skills that are going to help you have more success in this process. Okay, interviewing for a Google Program Manager of Risk Analytics. And one of the 4 discussions is cross-functional discussion. What should you expect? So we did cover that earlier on. I don't want to double up too much, but cross-functional is about collaborative, being a good team member, understanding how each other is resourced, etc. Those are going to be some key focus areas. Okay, you're in the negotiation phase with Google right now. Should I ask for more salary? The recruiter told me to do some research on my side about the salary. Yeah, set the anchor high. Always ask for more. And if you want to do research, levels.fyi is the best resource. Just set that anchor high. Greetings from Brazil. Awesome, one of my favorite countries. Just made it to your 3rd interview last week, and it didn't go well as expected, but the first interviews went great. Should you be worried? Let's just wait. We don't know. We don't have all the data. Sometimes, remember, one not great interview is not always enough for you not to land the job. So we're just going to have to sit back and wait. The waiting is definitely the hardest part. So just sit back and come back and let us know how it goes. Is there a possibility Google conducting a second Googliness and leadership round if they think they were not satisfied the first time? 100%. They can redo any interview prior to hiring committee if they think it was good enough, but they want more data. Question. At Google, the company priorities and industry are constantly changing. How have you dealt with constant change? What do you do to manage your priorities in a fast environment? Okay, so yep, the only constant is change. So I agree with that. So how do you manage priorities in a fast changing environment? You pivot as needed. So, what we would want to uncover in the clarifying questions is there a specific item or items that we want to pivot on? Have we ever faced this type of challenge before? Are we looking at a completely new challenge? We'd want to understand relationships. Are we looking at change based on internal priorities, external priorities, or both? And then in terms of the framework, okay, what are our overall goals? What is that historical data? Is the timeline to change right now, what is the risk of not changing? And then what's the overall scope and scale of the change, and how are we going to work with those stakeholders to get it done? And then when you dive in, that's in the solution. When you get role specific, you could say, let's imagine X change is coming in the market, because you know it's coming or it's currently happening. And then you drill down, focusing on those concepts. Scope and scale and risk would be really good ones to focus on. You got the following response after 10 days from your last interview. Let me know how you read this message. I'm waiting to hear back from the team, but I hope you enjoyed the interviews. In the meantime, have you thought about compensation expectations? I want to make sure we're aligned as to not waste your time. Okay, you're going to say, awesome, great to hear back from you. Yes, I've been thinking about compensation. I've been thinking about compensation expectations, and then say nothing else. You do not want to share any compensation expectations via email. You only want to do that via conversation, and you do not want to share or set that anchor high until you know they like you and want to hire you. Okay. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Okay. Yep. Like, comment, share. We love all that stuff, right? So we appreciate the support. We know the channel is growing. We know we're niche down. So we may never be the biggest channel. We're in the education space, which always isn't that exciting. But hopefully we continue to deliver great content. And the last thing I would say is we have a ton of content on our channel now. We're approaching 200 videos. There are some nuggets in there. There are some old videos in there. I don't want you to go back too far, but no, there's some old videos in there that are really good. And so, yeah, as you're just kind of searching around, you might find that some of the older content is still really relevant. Yeah, we're at almost 200 videos. So lots of great content. And thanks so much, Nicholas, for the shout out. Okay. The third interview was for Googliness and GCA questions, by the way. Okay. So if we can go back here, I'm just going to really scroll back really quickly to see if I can find that initial question. So I can attach to it, because I'm sure you've been waiting for some time. I can't find the initial question. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask you to come back again, because I'm not sure within all these questions. Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, so I'm sorry. Okay. So the last interview was for Googliness. Okay. They may want to redo it. We just don't know. So just come back and let us know. Okay. Yep. The last couple months helped a lot with your interview at Facebook. You didn't get selected because they selected a more senior person, but you're really happy with your performance. Yeah. And so collectively, we're not always going to land these jobs. Let's keep learning. Let's keep growing, keep pushing the envelope. And I want you to do what is the unimaginable. And the unimaginable is to continue, especially if you're in job search mode, but you're not actively interviewing. Just find an hour a week, a couple hours a week to keep the prep and practice going. It's going to make it so much easier when these interviews pop, and it is painful. Who wants to set aside time on a weekly basis for interviewing and for like practicing their interviewing and prepping? But it's really, really valuable. You will save so much time if you're consistent. In the last round for Google Customer Engineer, tips for presentation and how to prep for Googliness and leadership. Googliness and leadership, flip the coin. Negative, 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 unethical, conflict, really heavy duty challenges that you're all going to talk about positively, opportunities. You're really going to focus in on the positive. And then it's mentorship, great team building, great leadership. So there's that positive lens too. In the presentation, 7 slides. Don't put me to sleep. Make sure it's very interactive, that I really get a good pulse from you. And on the slides, less is more. Do not have me reading the slides. I want to be listening to you. Make sure it's a facilitation, not a presentation, and practice it with as many people as you can. Okay, so I think I covered that. And again, I'll just throw this up. We're really focusing in on this today, but if you go to practiceinterviews.com/questions, you can get to our question bank by signing up for the app and find some of those questions. We've got tons of CE questions. Your last interviewer wouldn't let you finish the answers. Is this a strategy? He was 7 minutes late, said he had to cut it short, did not ask about myself, as all others did not introduce himself. So not asking about you and not introducing himself doesn't matter. That's really not important. I'm glad that the other people did. What I do want you to do is I want you to have the overall timestamp and send that to your recruiter and just say, my interviewer was 7 minutes late and it was a 35-minute interview. So total interview time, 28 minutes, which would be about half the time that they're supposed to talk with you. Bad behaviors are consistent in these interviews because they can be. If you were on site, your interviewer could not show up 7 minutes late and could not leave the interview early because they'd have to take over for somebody else and they'd have to wait for that next person to show up in the room. So being all via video, it's creating an opportunity for bad behavior and it's not being checked. There is not a single checks or balances in place. The only checks and balances are you. So you have to share that feedback with your recruiter because they need to be talking to the interviewer about this bad behavior. How does one measure readiness for the PGM, non-tech, for Google interviews? Practice with somebody else. That will be your best gauge. If you epically fail or having major challenges with somebody when you practice, you're going to know you're not ready. If you don't practice, you will never know. Now, practicing does not have to happen with a professional. Obviously, that helps, but we have to verbalize our answers. So you can go ahead. I'm going to throw this up here. I don't know. Oh, Eric, we didn't do that. But if you even go into like our interview course, you can go through the course. You can use the practice tool, but you need to verbalize. Make sure that you're getting everything out loud. It's great to write it all down, but if we don't actually go through the cadence of speaking it out loud, it's not going to go as well. So practice is the #1 way to make sure that we can be successful in the interviews. Yeah, tell the recruiter. Okay. Yeah, I think we had a decent showing today of up over 50 people today, and that's kind of like the numbers are going up. So again, we love that positive feedback. Yes, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about looking at notes. Yeah, I would absolutely want you to have that cheat sheet. The cheat sheet is so beneficial. I'll throw that into the YouTube description, but if you want it now, just go to the YouTube channel and type in cheat sheet. I want your notes below because if they're here or here or here, it's going to be pretty obvious. But when we have the pen in our hand and we're writing down the question, we can have the notes down below. So I would definitely recommend having notes, high-level clarifying questions, frameworks, and title your behavioral answers, like conflict with Sue, Salesforce implementation, whatever it might be, just so you can remember the specific examples without any other notes. Well, I can't answer that question because the hiring manager stage, sometimes hiring managers don't interview at all. Sometimes they like to be the first interview. Sometimes they're somewhere in the interview process. Sometimes they do an RRK. Sometimes they do a GCA. So that's a little bit of an unknown. Just got approved for an L6 tech role. Awesome. So excited. I opened my expectation with a very high of L6 range from levels.fyi, waiting for a response. Okay. And any suggestion on how to maximize the negotiation process? Stick to your anchor. Your anchor is valuable in two facets. Your anchor is valuable in the initial negotiation. So we set that anchor high. They know that number sticks. Then when they come back with a lower number, the anchor has a second benefit to say, oh, that's still pretty far off my number. And then we start to concede. So it looks like we're really flexible. So let's say we ask for 400K, they offer 300K, and we say, look, we're pretty far off. So maybe there's a misunderstanding and maybe you're not willing to come all the way up to my number. But if you were willing to meet me in the middle, I'd be willing to accept. So we start to concede, but that's the power of the high anchor. We set the tone and stage really early on, and we continue to utilize that as a benefit. finished 5 rounds of interviews with Google and the recruiter got back saying they need an additional round. What does that mean? What tips to crack this final interview? Yeah, so it just means that they want a little bit more data, and or the likelihood is that one interview fell short. You're going to have to ask your recruiter, what is the specific focus area of that additional interview? What is the conversation like between the Google recruiter and one of the people listed on the candidates, people I know? Does the recruiter ask them to write up a summary? Oh, this is weird. I think the second one got cut off. Do you think the referrer can get annoyed if I've asked for the third time and possibly write something bad? It's not a discussion. It's just a request, and then they fill out a form. That should stick with the profile, though. Like, once you get a referral, it shouldn't have to keep happening. Something might have changed within GHire or the applicant tracking system that they use, but usually once they submit it, it sticks with you. So they shouldn't have to keep, the same person should not have to keep submitting the same referral. No, no, hiring committee is not an automated AI bot. It's human beings. Yeah, I just want to go back to this. This is definitely humans. I don't know if anybody would have told you something different, but no, there's humans, and it might be better if it was AI driven, quite honestly. Love the video guidance. Thank you. You're from the UK. Your situation is the HC has asked me to redo GCA. You're in hold mode. It's for GC level 6 or L7 partner role. How normal is this? Very, very normal. Lots of times they just want additional data. So reflect back to what didn't go well in that GCA interview before and really practice those open-ended hypothetical questions. To clarify on how many candidates question, it's a business analyst role. You'd already interviewed with the recruiter, and the next step is the hiring manager. Wonder how many candidates you're up against. I don't know. There are some things that we want to control in the process. Number of candidates, how often our recruiter will get back to us, what's the likelihood of passing hiring committee. And basically, I just want to tell you, I don't want you to waste your time with those questions. The only question you should be asking yourself is, did I prepare enough? Did I practice enough? Did I set aside enough time to make sure that I crush it for this dream opportunity? Those are the better questions to ask. If you ask yourself those questions, you're going to have better results. The other stuff is just 100% outside of our control. What should you expect for a recruiter that wants to sync regarding my interview after a tech screen? It depends on the messaging, right? So recruiters should be giving positive messaging. Hey, the tech screen went well. I want to set up time to talk about your onsite. When they do not give that indication, I get worried, but everybody has a different personality type, so we can't read it too much into it. We just have to hope that it really is positive. Let us come back and let us know how it goes. Okay, thanks for answering. For reference, I asked for a 230K base, 20% bonus, 1.2 million and 50K sign-on bonus for L6. The recruiter is focusing on first-year total comp specifically so far. You continue to be kind. Okay, so one of the things that's coming up now because of the 33, 33, 22, 12 model that Google's moved to is they are no longer focusing on a 4-year model. They're focusing in on the first year. And when you say, well, I'm focusing in on making X over 4 years, they say, we don't look at it that way. I do. And so it's the same thing when it comes to current comp, and they say, we don't care about current comp. I do. We need to get them on a little bit more of that empathetic side for us, because if they just say, okay, this is the way we do it, they're totally removing you as a human being and just treating you like a robot in a robotic process. I think these numbers are good. They're high. 230K base for an L6. That's on the higher end. 1.2 million, 20% bonus. Now, of course, 20% bonus is set in place, so that's immovable. 50K sign-on. Just make sure with sign-on, You're not giving up stock for sign-on. They've been doing that consistently across the board. Hey, we'll give you 50K in sign-on, but we're going to take away 100K in stock. It's never worth it. You always want to take the stock, always. At least that's not a financial advisor, but that's just my recommendation. I was in a very, very rare scenario at Google. Contractors basically never get offered sign-on bonuses. I negotiated pretty hard, not surprisingly, and I was offered one package, package A, or package B to take the sign-on and less stock. That would have been a devastating decision if I had taken the sign-on. That stock's value today, the differential in stock, is enormous. I think the differential is like 70K plus in positive. So now it was a long time ago, but the stock is always a valuable play. Oh my goodness. Awesome. The two ferns is Zach Galifianakis, and if you haven't seen it, it's pretty funny. I'm trying to change the setup, so I always want to know on the setup if people like the mic, if they like the background. I have an office. My office is technically a bedroom, so I stopped showing the closet doors. So I'm trying to switch it up. I got the extra light so that the lighting's pretty decent. So I'm always curious on the setup, though. I know it takes away from the questions, but always love any feedback. Thank you. How do you deal with priorities related question for a TAM role? Yeah, so the biggest thing with TAMs is, sometimes with TAMs and any of these external client facing roles, we put all of our priorities on the client side of things. And half the work we're going to be doing is internal. So how do we look at it from an internal, external? How can we prioritize items internally to have better external results, impact, success, whatever it's going to be? So I would just say don't get too far away from the internal. I think that's one challenge area that I see with a lot of the TAM clients that we have. They just get so external focused that they forget about the internal priorities of working with Eng and product and all those critical teams that you're going to need to collaborate with to ultimately deliver those results externally. I hope that helps. Also, do you have any tips for negotiating a Google position for other cities? Yeah, I mean, I think we might be too late on that unless they've told you that they're really flexible on the location. But where you're at in the process, you'd be introducing a variable that's probably not going to add a lot of value, especially with that very high anchor. So I would be careful at introducing that at this point in the process. How do you manage the projects without end dates for a TAM role? Welcome to the world of TAMs, program managers, not so much on the product side because that usually has strong delivery dates, but program manager roles and TAM roles. How do you manage projects without end dates? You just want to make sure that all the deliverables are accurately being tracked, and you're always reevaluating those deliverables and making sure that does it make sense, yes or no, to have an end date on these items. That's all. But yeah, this is pretty common for these types of roles that there would be no end date. Awesome. Okay, one more. How long does comp committee back and forth take? When do you know if it's finally truly an offer? When they won't move anymore. So best and final is not the end. There's still an opportunity to push and say, hey, we're really close. If we can just get the totals, you offered me 950 in total stock. If we can just get that up to 1 million, I'd be willing to accept. So best and final, there's still a little bit of a push point there. You'll know. They'll say, all right, that's enough. Like, this is it. We're done. We're really done. Like, no more. And then you'll move on. What happens if you don't know what's going to be your next interview? Just have 2 meeting invites and you're surprised when you enter the meeting room. Got to push back, Peter. You got to push back on your recruiter to figure out what those interviews are. I mean, they need to tell you that. And if they say they can't, say, I have really good friends at Google and they all tell me that they were given that information. I have friends who are interviewing right now. They told me they've been given that information. I'm really curious why you can't share the focus area of the interview. That's when I want you to get a little bit tougher. Thanks for your answer. As you said, the worst part, you're waiting. The waiting is the worst part, but feeling confident. Okay, good. Yeah, the waiting's tough. How do you manage customer expectations when your product team says a feature is not feasible due to technical limitations? Again, this is for a TAM role. Okay, so in this question, I think a lot of times with the product team, the technical limitations may just be based on timeline. So we want to establish, are there technical limitations just because you don't have enough time, because you don't have enough resources, or they're looking for a customization that does not actually exist, and Google, the product team as an organization, is not planning on rolling that item out. We have to ask those really, really probing questions. Then you can drill a little bit deeper on how you build relationships with internal teams, how you work with the client to really ascertain, like, do they need that feature right this second, or can we push, can we focus in on something else? Yeah, Lee, so I need to know role, role and location. Use the tactic with your recruiter. Is there anything I could have elaborated on that I should for future interviews? And she said, no, your experience aligns well with the role. Can I assume you'll be moved on? I don't know. I don't know. You're just going to have to wait and see. Again, I can't control that item, unfortunately. So yeah, it's just going to be patience, and that's, again, you'll hear it all the time. It just takes so much patience with these big tech companies that can move really slow. Thanks for the answer. You're not bullish either, but you think you did prepare enough and you're surprised that they'll call to reject, but you'll be sure to check for the feedback. Okay, great. Okay, thanks for all your help. You've been sending your channel to your friends as well. Wealth of information. Lots of ambiguity. I agree. So happy to, definitely happy to help. Public sector. Role is a partner in the public sector and based in the UK, reporting into an L8. Once you get an offer, you'll definitely hire me. Okay, so partner in the public sector. So I think the public sector, okay, so reporting to an L8. So I'm assuming this is like a partner role with a public sector focus. So it's going to be an L6 or L7. Remember, in the UK, what you want to do to get kind of that baseline on the salary is you want to look at the US salaries and like New York or Bay and chop it by like 30 to 40% in total comp. What's the biggest challenge in the UK? The market is very expensive and the cost of labor for tech is very low. Doesn't make sense. I'm really hoping for a change there, but 30 to 40% less in total comp of what you're seeing on levels.fyi. And of course, I want you to set the anchor higher than that, but that's just been kind of the average from what we've seen from our clients in the UK and across EMEA. Hi, Jeff. Just want to say thanks. Super helpful. Awesome. Awesome. Happy to be here. Okay, so you've set the anchor high. So at this point, you've done what you can do. Competing offers are great, but if we don't have them, you've done the work, which was you set that very, very high anchor. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Another TAM question. How do you deal with multiple projects for your customers, and how do you stay organized and manage customer expectations? Well, that's all about getting to that expectations and what do they believe is the most critical item or items. I am not going to do any of that guesswork. What are their goals and objectives? What's that historical data? What's the timeline, budget, risk? This becomes very, very operational. And then we can bring into our solution, okay, well, how do we do these items where we're really focused in on scalability, automation, availability, training and education? But we got to start with the operational component because we need to heavily, heavily focus in on like what exactly our client wants and not to like guess and say, okay, I think you want this. We got to find out what they want. Yeah, you can. You can say, hey, I'm interviewing with 3 companies. I really need you to push the process. Will they? Maybe, maybe not. The other piece when interviewing with other companies is like, some people interview with other companies because they're like, they want to up their skill set. But when you're not interested in those other companies, it's not always the best use of your time. But yeah, if you are interviewing with other companies, just let your recruiter know, keep that pulse, keep it open so that they have an awareness specifically of where you are in the interview process with any of these companies. And as anything upticks, like an offer is coming, you've completed your on-sites, just let them know. The waiting and process is tough. Great learning to share with your daughter. It's worth it. Okay, awesome. Hey, restating the question, you had to shorten it because it doesn't allow 200 characters. So I'm going to put the question in 2 questions to save space. Okay, as we're hitting your last question, if you can just throw any information in there, just so we can keep it going, because I know we're going to start to drop off and we're really kind of hitting the end of time. Okay, perfect. What would you do if an employee had a non-compete from his old company, but he knew previous employees that he wanted to interview at the current company? Yeah, I mean, this is like this is a googliness, this is a googliness item. So, but he was unable to give their information. How would you go about finding out the company and connecting those employees? This is really an item where you want to play it safe. Like, a non-compete is serious, and you would put your company at, like, there could be some real legal ramifications. So you're not going to try and push the envelope on this item, say, look, like, this isn't the way I would operate, because even though I know those people, and again, the question's a little foggy, but even though I know those people, it's just not the right move for me to do, because if your company was somehow ever connected, the liability and legality item is way more painful than maybe getting a few of these people on board. I hope that helps. Okay, post the video. Yeah, if you guys like it, please hit those likes, smash those like buttons, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. We love it when people subscribe. And obviously, okay. So sorry, we'll come back to that, but I can just throw this up here for a second. So we have a ton of free resources. So one quick item to note is we're going to be revamping our current course. We're going to make it a little bit more streamlined, and then we're really setting the date to release a paid course here coming up very, very soon. We've put like a year of work into this course. We think we've created the most systemized course out there for interviewing, so we're super excited. It's going to be out soon. But for anybody who wants any information or wants to just practice more, go to our course. It's free. And then I'm going to answer this last question, and then we're going to come off. So I made the mistake of giving a lower range in regards to salary. I've made it to the last round. Can I renegotiate whatever they're offering me? Yeah, you can always renegotiate. Even if you anchor low, you could say, based on my research, based on my conversations, I have more data now, and I actually need to change my number. Is that the ideal approach? No. We always want to go in and set the anchor high, but we shouldn't just get so attached to that initial number that we don't think about bringing in new numbers. Thank you, everybody, so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Continue to show up every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific. We'll be here to answer all your questions. Thank you.